Okay, how's it going, everyone? So this last week, there wasn't too much that happened that I wanted to record. I had a lot of family things that wanted to keep private. So this week I wanted to post a vlog a little bit about some of my design process with grids and columns. At Designing, we do a show called The Undo Show, and last week or 2 weeks ago we had just open Q&A, and someone asked about the 8-point baseline grid. And this is something that is very common, even in print design. Baseline grids are a core metric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through kind of our Design Inc. Template GUI, or graphic user interface. Anytime that I work on an app or a product and I've kind of realized the scope and scale of what the UI needs to consider, I create kind of a core file that has these core elements to pixel perfection, so that we can hand that off to engineering and they can use that as a base core library for either their SDK or for their CSS. And so I just wanted to walk you through some of my process and how I have approached designing UI for Design Inc., as well as some of the methodologies and why I do them. So just to get started, this is not at all my methodology. The 8-point grid system and the kind of metrics and workflow I'm using is very much derivative of material design from Google. Google had outlined this, and I'll link the description, but they have plenty of documentation and reasons why this works well, and why it's scalable across multiple screens and multiple densities of devices. Long story short, it's a great method. It works for Google, and so I didn't try and rethink it when we were designing Design Inc. So I've got this camera, and then I'm recording my screen so you guys can see. When it comes down to it, this is my sketch file. You can obviously do this in any software. I like to start off, especially if I'm doing a responsive web project, I'd like to start off with kind of a 1024 view, which is for me the minimum baseline for a decent desktop view. If you can see here, my column has some margin on there so you can show what kind of bleeds outside of the max width of the site. And then I have a 768 view with a subtle inset margin, which is representative of a tablet in portrait mode. 360, which is kind of a moderate cell phone view. The big thing to know is that in all of these views, you'll see a certain column layout and then a certain gutter. That gutter is 16 dips or pixels, depending on your context. But I'm using the base unit of 8 pixels. Or 8 dips, or 8 whatever, and I'm doubling that for my margins within my columns. And then for my desktop view, I've got an 8-column grid. For my tablet view, I have an 8-column grid and a 4-column grid for phone. I can show you a little bit of how I've set up my file, and I'll probably share this file and let it be downloadable as far as the initial template. It's nothing fancy, but I figure I can share it if it gets you off to a good start. Okay, so if you go under View and then Canvas, you have all these different options of what you want to show in the actual workspace, as well as being able to set your grid and layout settings. So I'm going to hop into grid settings. Here you can see I have a grid block size of 8 pixels with a thick line every 6 blocks. When you get into the columns, that's where it really becomes valuable. So if I go into my layout settings for this canvas here, I think it's a 1200 width on that desktop canvas. Then I have a 1024 column width, so that's kind of my max width. I have a total of 8 columns, a 16 pixel gutter, which means you have a 114 pixel column width. So this is all generated through the math of Sketch. You can also hear the vertical rhythm I'm setting at 48 pixels. This is kind of a nice vertical rhythm throughout the web page that I can align things and make sure things are flowing within that 8-pixel grid. So I'm going to keep this all how it is. I just wanted to kind of show you guys how I set up my file, and I get this very clean and set up before I jump into any design when I'm creating these kind of resource files. Okay, so you'll see here in my panel to the left, I have kind of a grid and the overall graphic user interface set up as a page. I have responsive web design components. This is basically showing how any UI group or UI element exists on desktop, tablet, and mobile. So instead of drawing all my screens across all of the different applications and UIs, I can say this component looks this way across these screens, and so that becomes a reference point instead of having to draw every screen within the application. I can get into that a little bit later. I also have layout templates, so for different hero screens or different parts or features of an application, there's a certain layout and a certain amount of rules that exist within that screen, and so I have these layout templates that kind of show how things should be arranged, what's fixed, what's fluid, what moves, what doesn't. And then lastly, I have an icon page where I have all my icons to export to SVG. It's probably an old process, but it works pretty clean for me. I'm going to jump into the grid UI page here. Basically what you'll see is I'm outlining for the engineer what my core metrics are. So there's an 8-point baseline grid, 16-point gutter and spacing, and a 48% vertical rhythm. This helps the engineer understand kind of my pace and rhythm from a metric standpoint, so that those things can be consistent across the pages. I'm throwing out some simple colors and hexes, so they don't have to sample and understand all the different colors I'm using in the UI. This is something that I adopted from material design, but it's also very useful to define kind of a taxonomy of what you're naming different type treatments. So I have header treatments and body treatments here for both light and dark, for title headers, regular headers, sections, wizards, body, subtext, footer, meta, body icon lockups. You can really make this whatever you need it to be depending on your application, but it's nice to have a taxonomy with your engineer to be able to discuss, hey, just go use the subtext type treatment. And then icon size is another big thing for me. This all falls in with it, that 8 pixel or dip baseline metric. So you have 24, 32, 48, 64, 96. And I try and restrict myself to only using those icons within those metrics so that I can maintain that consistent rhythm and flow throughout the design. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into shared styles. So here we have some different drop shadows and shared styles that you'll see, whether they're strokes, border radiuses, and drop shadows. We have a very similar material design, different levels of depth within our cards that we use. And so I'm kind of just providing some detail and design there. All of these project files in Sketch I'm exporting to Zeplin. Zeplin provides all this as well, and allows the engineer to inspect. But I like to just kind of delineate it here in the style guide so they can see it. I show all the different button styles. With their regular and hover state on black, on dark, and on light. And then I have different card and dialogue styles, so showing how those will exist on dark and on light, as well as different avatar lockups. So we have lots of avatars for our different users and clients within the app, and so showing the different ways that we lock those up. And I try and keep those pretty consistent and reuse these components so the engineer isn't having to constantly design and code new things. The last page within this grid GUI document is simply just our fields. So I have all the form fields and their normal, complete, active, invalid state for regular text fields, passwords, drop-downs, tags in both light and dark. So once again, this is all very basic stuff, but once you've fleshed out a UI and understand kind of the overall language, it's nice to have the source file as kind of the go-to source of truth. So with the responsive web components, there's a couple things that are global across a site or application that I think are important to outline how they work and evolve depending on the user state. Some good examples of these would be a navigation and how a navigation or a different breadcrumb or tab UI will evolve. Different column layouts. If you have we have these component cards that were these tiers, if you will. With those tiers, we show how that will evolve across screens when you can't align horizontally, how those stack vertically, and those cards layouts change as well. So see here, there's a 3-column grid, all kind of centered. Those go to a stat card with a 2-column layout, and then on mobile, a vertical layout. Likewise, we had these portfolio cards that showed kind of your portfolio, some of the pricing, and then some descriptions. Those cards evolve, and some of those elements evolve across screen sizes. And lastly, we have these request cards, which is based on our current model at Design Inc., where you can see a request with a budget and a description, and those cards evolve as well across different screen sizes. So this is very kind of a small part of the style guide, but they're very key components that are the kind of the main surfaces of the app that need to evolve across different sizes. And you can use this in a web and even in a native context depending on whether you're designing for phone and tablet or a full responsive web page. Once again, all of these are on that same column system, 8-pixel dip and baseline, with all of those core metrics informing the type size, the icon size, the spacing, the padding, all of the UI elements within the layout. Lastly, I have layout templates, which is kind of drawing a key hero screen and how it lays out within our grid. So you can see here, this was a menu page that we had of a certain design deliverable. So it showed kind of the main item name, the tiers that we offered, and then some marketing copy below. And it shows how those same elements evolve as far as layout across phone and tablet. So this is kind of how I tackle multiple screens. I try not to draw every screen, but I try to at least show a reference for each core moment in the UX and how I envision the type size, layout, typography evolving across those breakpoints or those devices. These sites, I also like dumb back all of the visuals and all of the graphics so that it's obvious that it's a template and not a specific screen. This helps communicate the context of the design and what it's used for. The last thing is all of my icons, of course, like I said, designed at a minimum of 24 pixels or dips or units, whatever you're using. The most important part of this is that this is my 1-to-1 ratio for stroke width, for spacing, for making icons centered within a square. And this 24 source icon will scale up if I do my job right. So at 24, 48, 96, whatever the icon is visualized at within the app, if I get it right at 24, outline it and export it as a SVG in the correct way, it will maintain its integrity across that metric grid regardless of how big it is, the density of the device, or how large we scale that SVG. So I have them kind of organized by categories of navigational icons, wizard icons, project icons, deliverable icons, tiers. So this is kind of a source for me. I know a lot of people have different icon workflows. I prefer Sketch right now. I know that Illustrator is doing this now too, but it's very easy to take this icon, make it exportable at different resolutions if you're not using SVGs, which is nice as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I want to keep this short and sweet, and this is a very design-heavy vlog, obviously. But I wanted to share that with you guys, and hopefully it's useful. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up in the comments. Please like the video if this is useful, and share if you want to tell your friends. If you have any questions, hit me up on Twitter. I'd love to talk through this more and share some of my process. Once again, it's nothing new. I'm kind of stealing what I've learned at Google and implementing it a little bit within our own current workflow. So I'd love to hear what you guys think.